Sandy Renee from CookingChew.com, and today we're going to talk about reheating meatloaf. Now, we can talk about it without it being in front of us because there's quite a few things that I think come to mind. One, I struggle with leftovers. So I know that reheated or leftover meatloaf is extremely popular, but do you feel like, I guess it starts with, what I've learned is that it really starts with how to store it. So when we're done making meatloaf, right? I keep wanting to say eating meatloaf. That's why I'm struggling with my words. When we're done with meatloaf, we've had some meatloaf. Now we have half a meatloaf left over. Do you think it's better to slice it and store it? Or do you think store it as a half? Does it retain more moisture? Which way?
Well, it will retain more moisture if you seal it up properly as a whole.
As a whole.
So if you have half of one left over, seal it up as a whole, but seal it well. But honestly, if you, let's say you pre-sliced it for dinner and then that's what you have left, you can either gather it up exactly as it is, and just covering it tightly is really the way to keep it moist. If you're going to, freeze it or do whatever, then that's a different thing. You'll want to definitely make sure it's tightly wrapped before you freeze it.
Right. So here's where I struggle. So we have the meatloaf, right? And we put it in our dogs have feelings about this, by the way. We put it in.
Let's keep going.
Okay. So we wrap it up and we put it in a plastic container. So do you suggest that we wrap it and then put it in the container?
To refrigerate it?
Yeah.
No, I don't think so. I think you just need an airtight container.
Okay.
You only got about 3 days with it to keep it fresh and safe to eat. So no, I would only wrap and then put it in a container if you're going to freeze it, because you want to keep the air out.
Right. Okay. So then our reheating methods are: you can reheat it in the skillet, you can reheat it in the microwave, or you can reheat it in the oven, right? So which method do you personally prefer?
How much of a hurry am I? That's the thing, is that meatloaf often can, if you let it go too long in the microwave, you're going to make it tough with chewy edges. So in order to avoid that, I would be more likely to reheat it in a skillet, especially if I'm reheating it for company, for example. Because if you overheat it in the microwave, and you know how a microwave can unevenly heat. It doesn't, sometimes it leaves hot spots.
I don't prefer things heated in the microwave for sure.
Right, so a lot of them, that's why they have a turntable, but it's easy to let it go too long.
Well, it's interesting to me because when you cook the meatloaf, you cook it in the oven, but you're saying reheat it in the skillet, which is one of the methods in our article, by the way. And I think it's the more popular method. I didn't realize that people actually used a skillet like that until we started this website.
Really?
No, it totally surprised me. But I can see the benefits, because here are the steps. You put it, put a little bit of oil in the skillet.
Oil or broth or water, doesn't have to be oil. If you're using a cast iron, a little bit of oil will keep it from sticking. But you don't need a whole lot, but oil or broth helps it keep it moist.
Broth is interesting.
I mean, it's one of those things where if you happen to have some in your fridge, or if even like your meatloaf might have been lacking a little flavor, a little broth can help.
What kind of broth? Chicken broth?
Any
broth. What are those little cubes that you use a lot? Could you use that?
I prefer better than bouillon in the little glass jar. I love that stuff. It has a lot of flavor and it reconstitutes really well. But you have to be careful because it is, it's a powerful flavor.
So it's intense. So in that case, if we use that, would you put some of that with some water and then put that in the skillet?
If you have it, yes, I would say that it will help the flavor and the moisture of the meatloaf when you're heating it in a skillet.
That's interesting.
Well, and it's one of those things where it's an extra step. A lot of people don't want an extra step. They want to fling it in the microwave. So,
well, of course, if you're at work, you don't have a skillet.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
But if you're at home and you're maybe making a second meal out of it, then I can totally see. So, okay, so you put it in the skillet, and what does it say? So basically, you put the lid on.
The lid is
Why is that important?
Well, it's one of those things about keeping it moist, and you don't want to overcook it regardless.
Right.
But in that case, it's holding the moisture in, because chill in general can dry out food.
Right.
So you want to hold the moisture in, but you don't want to have so much moisture and heat that it has it break apart, because it will fall apart.
Right. Okay. So then you put it at medium, and then put it in there in the skillet, and you're just you flip it, right?
You
don't have to.
With the
You don't have
cover
to.
on, you probably don't even need to flip it. If you're worried about it breaking apart, like it's not a real dense meatloaf, just leave the cover on and then just remove it. And of course, in reality, you kind of have to taste test. So in this particular case, you may want to take your very clean hands and touch the center of your piece of meatloaf and see if it's been thoroughly warmed through. You don't want to overheat it or it will become tough. And of course, if it's underheated, it's going to be cold in the middle. So there's a balance. It's just that you do want to start with a medium preheated pan to help this along.
Yeah. Do you think? I when I see these articles, I know they're helpful. They're one of our top articles on the website, or How to Reheat. It's one of the top things that we do, and I think it's been one of the more interesting things to really test, because we have someone that comes into the kitchen and reheats this stuff and tests the methods. Someone that's not a cook, and she's actually a photographer. She comes in and tests all this stuff, and it's been an interesting experience. I feel like we've learned a lot, or I've learned a lot. I feel like you already knew a lot.
Oh, I've learned so much.
But I know you've also had a lot of assumptions, things you thought were true that turned out not to be true.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so in testing all of these things, we learned so much. But here's one of my questions I have for you, actually. In this article, we have, I think, 4 different methods for reheating meatloaf. By the way, one of them is not air fryer. We're going to have to do a different article on that. But because now I love reheating everything in the air fryer. It's just become my thing. But do you feel that most people just throw it in the microwave and move on with their life?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that it's just so fast that it's hard to resist.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's the thing is the trick to reheating in a microwave is just making sure that you don't overheat it. If you have a turntable, that helps to cook it evenly. Cover it with a pan or with a lid like this one. We have been using and overusing this somewhat filthy microwave lid, which does really well at keeping in splatters as well as keeping in a little bit of moisture.
Right.
You can also use a paper towel or another plate.
Yeah, the other plate thing is a good trick. Especially as long as it has a little curve to it, right?
Right.
Yeah. But I think if you were going to make leftover meatloaf for dinner, I think you could make it a brand new special dinner if you did take the time to reheat it, maybe with a little sauce or broth on the stovetop. It makes it a little more special than just throwing it in the microwave. So I think microwave for lunch, but if you want to make another dinner out of it, maybe it's like you had meatloaf Monday night and then you have leftover meatloaf on Wednesday night, it's going to feel like a better dinner experience for sure to reheat it. Surprises me, honestly. I didn't think it would make that much of a difference, but these things really do matter.
I mean, and you have to remember too that leftover meatloaf, or really leftover anything, isn't going to be as sexy as when you first cooked it. So
meatloaf is never sexy, by the way.
I mean, it depends on how hungry you are, but
well, that's true.
Basically, it's going to be a little rough around the edges no matter how you reheat it. If you're lucky, it'll still be just as delicious.
Right. Okay, great. Well, if you have any questions, do let us know, because clearly we can talk about this for a very long time.
Feel free to reach out. You can email us at hello@cookingchew.com. But thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time, and keep cooking and chewing.